thanks so much for having me. I am thrilled to be with you today, albeit digitally, but it seems that the times where we could all be together to share a cup of coffee or a glass of wine is just around the corner. Can't wait. I have the great pleasure to run ARENI Global, a research and action institute dedicated to the future of fine wine. And our mission is to build a well-researched, global and multidisciplinary approach to a world undergoing change, and to help the fine wine ecosystem to approach structural and cyclical transformation. So now, why am I speaking at a coffee conference? Well, coffee and wine and specialty coffee and fine wine in particular have a lot in common. They have actually so much in common that the first draft of that presentation was 45 minutes long, and it's been a huge struggle to achieve the time requested, so hopefully I kept the most interesting parts. But they are both widely enjoyed beverages. They are agricultural products that can sometimes be raised to an art. They are cultural symbols, and of course we share an audience with many of our consumers starting their day with coffee and ending it with wine. They also have many things that set them apart, from production methods, distribution system, or to our deepest regrets, they don't have the same taxation rate. But from what I understand, wine has been a source of inspiration and benchmark for some aspect of the specialty coffee world. Wine, and indeed fine wine, has for sure many enviable traits, from its long history to its developed tasting language and service codes, and let alone its capacity to sell for thousands of dollars a bottle. But on my side of the fence, we also talk about you with quite a lot of envy, as we look at the future and see how much you guys seem to be more equipped to deal with the challenges ahead. So let's see, what can coffee learn from wine, and what could wine learn from coffee? Now, you've certainly noticed that I've slightly switched from talking about wine to referring to fine wine only, and maybe that is where we need to start our talk. We've been studying, what the definition of fine wine is for 3 years now, and I've put you there the collective definition that we came up with after, more than 200 interviews with trade and collectors and drinkers alike. And if you look at it, you can see that there's actually like 4 pillars, 4 things that a fine wine has to have so it can be considered fine. The first thing is the kind of objective criteria, which is what we refer to as BLIC, so balance, length, intensity, complexity, and how it all play harmoniously in the glass. So it refers to what fine wine is, what the liquid is. Then the second part is about the magic, the emotion, the wonders that it creates for the one drinking it. The third part is really interesting for me to see, because it's the relationship with its maker, and the expression of truth that the winemaker express through fine wine. And actually, fine wine doesn't happen by mistake. Everything, every teeny tiny detail is thought after in the production method, and that's something that we are going to talk about later, but it's surely an interesting dimension for fine wine here. And the last one is the one that we've added only last year, which is about sustainability, which is, of course, fine wine needs to be sustainably produced, and I think that's also a similarity that both our world share, is like that need to make our industry more sustainable in everything that sustainability covers. So now, if we look at how specialty coffee defines itself, and the journey that you've made from defining yourself only kind of technically through a set of scores, scoring the coffee beans and the coffee itself, the brewed coffee itself, to something of a very consumer-centric approach. Specialty coffee is whatever people consider to be special, is actually there. You can see, one of the most biggest difference between our two ecosystem is the importance of the consumer. Since the beginning, you put it in the middle. To us, I mean, maybe in the second pillar, so the drinker, but you can see that wine is still the subject, is still front and center. I mean, the drinker is only here to drink the wine and to have emotion, but but I really admire that consumer centricity that you have, and we'll see that can also impact the way we look forward at things. And talking about that, now one of the reasons we are all here is actually to look ahead and ask ourselves what we can do to build a better future-proof industry for us and for all our stakeholders and customers included, and to thrive in the world of tomorrow. So these are, of course, very complex questions, and with only 18 minutes to address them, I thought we could actually focus on what is, to me at least, the two biggest differences between our two worlds. And the fine wine industry is many things, but what it is first and foremost, and you've started to see it through our definition, it's a bottom-up industry. Like, production runs the game. And looking ahead, this could be both a help, and hopefully those opportunities will resonate with you, or a hindrance as well. And maybe that is where we could get our inspiration from you guys. So a product-driven company, or in our case, a product-driven industry, is a business developing a product first, then searching for a market for it. And that sums up the fine wine industry pretty much quintessentially, because you've seen it in our definition. Fine wine is considered unique, and winemakers make their life mission to express the best of what's been given to them and to sublime, their terroir. We can talk about the notion of terroir for hours if you've got any questions about this after. But so this production centricity has many consequences, some negative. So one being that all the major helps and financial support, at least in Europe, are driven towards production and not developing market or marketability. And when you consider the world of today with increasing competition, fine wine being produced in more and more countries, in more and more different styles, and market being more and more saturated, maybe that unbalanced between helping to develop production and helping to develop sales could be a big hindrance for us in the future. We are seen both internally and externally as close-minded and inward focused people, and maybe that's because we are production driven, so maybe it relates to the farmer mentality, just working around its church and not really looking ahead. I don't know, but that certainly doesn't really help, and of course it's changing, but that's our heritage. We are very protective of our traditions and ways of doing, which is also both a strength and a weakness. And what we do is we talk and write books and create YouTube channels and Instagram accounts to actually tell about who we are and why we are so unique, and what we are, what are the technical factors that explains the small nuances of why we are so unique and our nature-based differentiation. So basically we talk a lot at people. And we've got very little understanding of who the consumer is. We just published a 2-year study on fine wine consumers, which I believe is the first of its kind. And as we had very little intel so far, and by the way, I'm very happy to share some of the results if you're ever interested in knowing, the segmentation and profiles of fine wine buyers around the world. And one of those consequences as well is what we say and how we see the world is very European-centric, because to some extent, fine wine is still produced mainly in Europe, and even when it's produced in other countries like California or Australia, they've had a lot of European influence in the way they do things, in the way they see things. So again, our language, code and culture are dictated by the production countries. And so what it means is that when you sell your wine to your own market, that's totally fine. You speak the same language, you've got the same references. But when you try to go on the exports market and convince people that've got no ties with Europe, no shared reference in terms of cuisine, in terms of culture, then again you end up talking at people and trying to force them into your world more than talking with them and include them. And of course that is a big hindrance for the future, or that could be. And also being production centric means also that so far we've had a huge digital gap that we're only starting to work on now. Fine wine's always focused on bringing people together socially, and that's also something that we share with specialty coffee. So, being in the online world wasn't really a big priority, and of course 2020 has changed that. So we'll see how it develops in the future. Now, being production focused has also a lot of opportunities, and of course, because fine wine wouldn't be in the place that it is today, if that wasn't any good thing about being production centric. So this sense of place that is so important in the fine wine world, the fact that product A produced in vineyard A by winemaker A can be really different than product B produced in vineyard B by winemaker B, is supposed to protect us from competition, because that's something that you can't export. Terroir is something that you can't export. So that could be considered a good thing. And it also means we are a very fragmented industry. And the good thing about that is that it allows small players. There's a lot of diversity in fine wines in terms of countries of origin, in terms of style, in terms of philosophy as well. And there's also, and I don't think we do that on purpose, but there's also huge diversity in the consumer base, because there's loads of small players that can address loads of different needs and some niche markets, and so that's also something very interesting. And I think one of the things that being production driven gives us is that there's a lot of value which is retained within the country of production, and there's a lot of attractivity for countries of production. And you've all heard of œnotourism. Well, œnotourism brings more than $2 billion a year to California only, and in direct and indirect sales. And I was just wondering, why could Coffee Country tomorrow not become a touristic destination as well? I've put you some pictures of some of the most beautiful places I've been to in terms of wine tourism. And when you look at who's going there, what are the profile of tourists that goes there, well, you've got the wine geeks. They want to know everything. Wine is the sole purpose of their visits. But you also have what we've identified as the gastro tourist. So for them, food and wine is a very important element. And that's where we share already a huge base of consumers. I mean, those people are interested in wine, but that they're interested in everything that could be tasted and that could be eaten or drunk. So there's already segment of consumers that are all for it. And the last one is the passing by, casual wine tourist. We know wine region, so let's visit a winery. And coffee countries are amazingly beautiful countries as well. So maybe there's a card to play here. You'll tell me after. And here you can see a quote as well. I've heard, I've asked loads of my wine network people to let me know what they think coffee did better than us. And that was, I think, a very interesting point and a spot on point, is that even in wine tourism, again, wine is front and center, and it's the only thing usually when you go to a winery, all that they do is talk to you about wine and their wine in particular. And that quote refers to, all those amazing coffee shops where coffee is important and it's quality coffee to be served. And that's the main, drivers for people to go there. But they stay there because they find loads of other things that's of interest for them, whether it's bikes, knitting, skateboards, sneakers, whatever, coffee has that gift of, tying in with other interests in people's life that we don't have. And I think could be an inspiration for us. One of the things that being production driven also gives you, and also that ties in with, there's a lot of family owned business in the fine wine world. People buy from people. And here you've got, labels of fine wine with the name of the people that are actually making wine front and center. And to some extent that also has helped fine wine in assessing its credibility. Like if you are so proud of your product that you can put your name on it, then for people it's a guarantee of quality and proud. So maybe tomorrow we could see bags of coffee with the name of the grower, the signature of the roaster, and stuff like that. Why not? And finally, something that fine wine has, and that coffee for sure has not, is, fine wine is perceived as elitist, and because you need a lot of social, financial, and cultural capital. You need to know people so you can access the bottle. You need to have financial resource because, let's be honest, those bottles can be pretty expensive. And also cultural capital. Again, all the codes and language that we've described above, and that can actually make people feel like they do not belong, they're not worthy of, because they don't have those social, financial, cultural capital. And I think fine wine has just to, get together and admit that we are an intellectual drink and that we can't compete with beer or spirits, because, people have a very different relationship with wine. And because we also put knowledge front and center. I think you got that as well, because it takes a life to understand all the nuances and the reasons behind those nuances. And if you take the wine trade, people are very, very curious, and they're also lifetime learners. We spend our life learning about all those nuances, and we love learning. We're super geek about things, as you might have concluded already. And one of the things that I also did to prep that talk is I contacted, my SOMS contact, in some of the best restaurants and hotels in the world. And sommeliers are in charge of the wine list, but they're also in charge of all the beverages in restaurants and hotels. And I asked them what they thought about coffee, and they are generally very, very interested. But what they told me is the main difference between wine and coffee is that when you talk to wine people, you actually talk to the producer, so you can get a good idea of who they are, what their philosophy, what they aim, what their goal, so you can be better ambassador for them on the floor. When you talk to coffee people, you talk to the sales reps, the sales representative, and sometimes they don't have the same capacity to explain the stories, the specificities, and all of that. And I know that the coffee world has invested a lot in baristas, and they are key, of course. But the SOMs are here, and they are already used to function with stories, origins, specificities. They understand that quality and uniqueness comes with a price. They are eager to learn, and they are already seeing themselves as ambassador of greatness. So they could also be a great network of people for the coffee world and the specialty coffee world. And so finally, as a word of conclusion, I think you've seen through the presentation that one of the things that we could really learn from specialty coffee is that open-mindedness, that willingness to talk to people about them, to fit in their life and how it makes sense to them. So I'm leaving you with some other quotes that I received from my network, and I can't wait to see how all of this resonated with you. Thank you very much for listening to me, and should you want to contact me, or have more results on the fine wine consumer study that we've done, or follow what we are doing at ARENI, you've got all the infos here. Thank you so much. Bye.